Hi, my name's Dave Treat. I lead Accenture's blockchain and multi-party systems, and I am incredibly excited to be joined here by Chris Giancarlo, former commissioner of the CFTC, but really you've been incredibly busy since then. To share a little bit about the variety of activities underway.
Thank you, David. It was really an honor to be able to serve my country for 5 years at the CFTC, and the second half of that as chairman of the agency, and really direct its response to this new wave of digitization of our global economy and our financial markets, what some people call the internet of value, and the impact that's had on financial market and impact on financial regulation. And now, since leaving the agency, I'm really dedicating myself to continuing to see through areas where our financial system needs to be modernized. David, you look around at us and you see the aging of our physical infrastructure that was state-of-the-art at the latter half of the 20th century is becoming aged and decaying in the 21st century. In a similar way, the same things happen in our financial market infrastructure. So I'm taking on a number of projects from the wonderful platform of Wilkie Farr & Gallagher, an international law firm where I've joined as senior counsel, allowing me to focus on a number of projects. One is the development of a new benchmark called Ameribor, which replicates LIBOR in that it represents the rate of borrowing of unsecured lending in the banking market, but focused on the American market, the American economy. Secondly, I'll be chairing a joint venture between Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae called CSS, or Common Securitization Solutions, that's really focused on modernizing the American home finance market and the mortgage market. And that's vitally important. It's the world's second largest market, and yet a lot of its forms and functions were developed decades ago and need to be brought up to date, including technologically as well. And then finally, a wonderful announcement we made just a few days ago that we're partnering with Accenture on the digital dollar project to look at and to start thinking through some of the challenging issues in the development of a tokenized form of the US dollar. Right now, the dollar comes in two forms. It comes in coins, it comes in cash. What we're talking about is seeing if it's possible to develop a third form of the dollar, and that would be a digital form, a central bank digital currency of the US dollar that would provide enormous benefits, we think, in terms of lowering the costs, shortening the speed of global transfer payments, but really bringing millions of people that are unbanked into the ability to participate in global markets in a more direct way. So we think there's a lot of advantages for that. I'm delighted to be working with Accenture on it, on these projects.
Yeah, since the op-ed that you published in the Wall Street Journal in October,
yes.
We've had a really intense dialogue,
yes.
Productive one and exciting one, to be able to really think through our focus. Working with central banks around the globe and some of the other work that we've undertaken, but to be able to apply it to the U.S. context against the unique requirements and context of the U.S. dollar is incredibly exciting. And I think maybe some of the richest part of it has been the attitude that our joint teams have taken around starting from a principles basis. I think that has been crucial, and being able to intend and will follow through on bringing in that multi-stakeholder community to represent the various facets is critical. You're very eloquent about the position of a core principle around the U.S. dollar's position in the global markets. It's worth sharing.
So it certainly is. And one of the things that's interesting about our approach is we seem to find ourselves with many efforts right now to look at central bank digital currency. I think Mark Carney, the Bank of England, just announced a big collaboration amongst many central banks around the world. We know that China is looking at this as well. But yet, sometimes there's an American way of doing things. And one of the things, whenever America's embarked upon big projects, whether it's been the space program or the internet development, there's always been a public-private partnership. The private sector in the United States often plays a big role in big projects. The ability to marshal intellectual horsepower, marshal resources, marshal our universities and others. And so we're approaching this from the point of view of a private sector initiative, fully transparent to the public sector, but where we can marshal the resources, the thought power that Accenture brings. My own experience, having been a government official, my brother Charlie Giancarlo with his Silicon Valley experience. And we think that is a distinctly American way, and it may not be the way of Europe, it may not be the way of China, but it's certainly, I think, a way that makes sense as we think about an enormous project, the digitization of the dollar. And we've also talked about the importance of the dollar. I'm one of those who believe that it's not just a coincidence, but it's actually, there's a degree of causation in the fact that we've seen regional global markets develop into a globalized market over the last several generations, and that's coincided with the rise of the dollar as the world's premier reserve currency. The dollar offers a degree of stability of prices, of price discovery that's centralized in the world's commodity markets, in the world's financial markets, and a stable economy, a growing economy, one of the world's few growing economies. And so I think the dollar's utilization to modernize it, it's an analog instrument, let's bring it into the digital economy and have it serve that role for generations to come. I think the dollar serves more than just US interests. I think it serves global interests as a strong reserve currency amongst others as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think part of what I'm looking forward to the most is taking a lot of the work that's happened over the past several years around the blockchain and DLT space, thinking through use cases around how to actually transform industries, not just in financial services, but cutting across a variety of different sectors. And it always has, many of them have come back to this core element of being able to not just assume that the cash movement in the digital world is something that moves separately from the service interaction or the online purchase, et cetera, to truly rethink it rather than what we've been doing for the past decades is been trying to automate and make the existing process move faster. Right. To now suddenly truly be able to transform is exciting, and to take a deliberate approach to think through sector by sector, exactly use case by use case, and stakeholder group by stakeholder group. We've been brainstorming lists of who to bring in, and who to have involved, and everyone from consumer advocacy to ethicists to constitutional experts. Right. I think between the Digital Dollar Foundation and Accenture and our wider networks, really excited about the group we're going to pull together.
Well, one of the things that I've really enjoyed is how we very quickly realized in this project that our effort is not about speed. Our effort is about getting it right, and a clear-eyed recognition right from the start that this is complicated. There are going to be many elements of this that are going to take careful thought, time-taking attention to detail, and bringing the right group together of expertise, as you said, and all of those categories, plus folks that are experts in anti-money laundering, which is a legitimate and key concern to get that right, to look at issues of money transfer, of central banking concerns, of monetary policy. And that's what we're trying to do with the Digital Dollar Project, is to do a lot of the thinking and thought leadership and make that all available to the public sector as such time as the US government wishes to engage in this. We'll have done some of the thinking through. And again, I think that's a distinctly American approach, and it's one that I think is a virtue.
Yeah. So predict out we've been planning, right? But the emotional experience or kind of this is going to be a fun ride. Make a few predictions around what's involved for the next 12 months. What are we talking about a year from now?
Well, I can predict there's a lot of hard work.
Yeah, that's true.
I can predict a lot of long sessions, and I can predict perhaps a few surprises along the way. Elements of economic activity that one might think could easily adapt to a new digital environment. You may find elements of it actually are more complicated. Sometimes analog systems have their own complexity that is not easily digitized, and I think we'll find that as we do this as well. But the digitization of our world has been taking place now for several decades, right? The first wave of it in the internet, right? When the internet first emerged, I remember people saying it's not good for anything other than distributing pornography. Well, but then we discovered it was good for hailing a cab, and it was good for booking a vacation, it was good for downloading music, it was good for really increasingly sophisticated uses of gathering information, of data analysis, right? And unfortunately, it's still good for downloading pornography. So the point being is that you can always criticize a new wave of technology, and it's a valid point, and yet it can be so much more. And I think this next wave that we're seeing now, the digitization of value, the easy knock on it is it's only good for scamming and illicit behavior, right? Well, guess what? 30 years from now, we'll have found all kinds of really positive use cases, and yet there'll still be scammers. In fact, my experience as a market regulator is regulation is always a degree of a game of cops and robbers. There are always bad people using the next evolution of technology to perpetrate some bad endeavor. And if you stop there and you say, therefore, we're not going to go down that road, you'll never advance. When the early planes came about, they crashed often, and people might have said, well, there's no good flying. But you know what? We've gotten beyond that. And I think the goal here in this digitization of value that we're finding is to develop the positive use cases, the positive ability of central banks to execute monetary policy in a way that's positive, to bring banking services to the world's unbanked, to serve immigrant populations that need to remit money back to their families back in less developed areas, that we can make faster, we can make less expensive, that we can make more immediate so they can get help where it's needed. So again, it's easy to knock every evolution of technology, but we need to go beyond that. We need to be, in a sense, more mature than that and say, how do we harness this for the good? I think that's something that's typically American. We've always taken new technologies and harnessed it for the good, and that's the challenge once again.
Yeah, one thing we've never talked about, but it immediately leaps to mind is I've been incredibly impressed with the stance that the regulators have taken with this wave of technology. I think in prior waves it was when you're ready to come have me test it, we'll test it.
Yeah.
The proactive nature with which I've seen the global regulatory community, but in particular the U.S. regulatory community, certainly you were the prototypical example of this, of someone who took an attitude that says, if we're not in the dialogue, if we're not proactively learning, if we're not engaging, your do no harm constructs, I think is very telling for a shift where we can actually engage the innovators and the regulators on a different basis to drive forward more productively. Obviously, you still have to regulators still have to maintain the safety, security, soundness, role and defend that, but to be able to engage the innovators and in that dialogue on a proactive basis is really materially different.
So I have a real perspective on that, having been someone that was in the center of the financial crisis, having operated the world's largest trading platform for over-the-counter credit default swaps, which were highlighted in the crisis, and then gone into the regulatory community. And what you had was a post-crisis period where at a global consensus, there needed to be reforms to the global financial markets. And those reforms were implemented during the first half of the 2010 decade, right? And what we realized is those very reforms added an enormous amount of operational and capital complexity to our financial markets. And so on the second half of the decade, we started realizing that the solution to that added complexity was technology. And we at the regulatory body really realized this technology is part of the solution to the reform, to making the reforms work. And so we opened our apertures, and certainly in the mid part of the decade through the end of certainly my term, and now continuing under my successor, the CFTC and other American regulatory agencies are really trying to become quite market intelligent. We launched something called Lab CFTC at the CFTC, which was meant to be our point of contact with the innovation community to how we could understand how their innovations are changing markets, but also how their innovations can help us do a better job as regulators. And I think it's worked very well. It's become a model for other regulatory agencies in the United States. And I think that engagement with innovation is really the way forward for regulators.
Yeah, and having Daniel Gorfine, who built Lab CFTC, with you as part of the Digital Dollar Foundation and a partner in us in the Digital Dollar Project is fantastic. A great mind to add to the team.
Absolutely, and really understands the interplay between regulation and innovation, and he's really on the cutting edge of that. And I have to give a shout out for my brother Charlie Giancarlo, the CEO of Pure Storage, former senior executive at Cisco Systems, for also joining the foundation and bringing his knowledge of project management of large technological projects and seeing them through to fruition to help give us that perspective as well at the foundation and on the Digital Dollar Project.
Yeah, we've assembled a great team, a joint team.
A lot more to follow.
We're opening up the aperture, as you say, to bring in all of the appropriate stakeholder groups. We've really given ourselves every advantage. I guess the pressure's now on. We've got to deliver.
Yeah.
So
deliver.
It's
deliver
good.
it right, not fast.
That's right.
Someone asked me yesterday, who's going to be the first to develop a digital central currency, and my answer was not the United States, because it's not, I don't think, in the United States' interest to be first. It's in the United States' interest to get it right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to aim to help do.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here in Davos. Our partnership, on the project, you and I have been a bit of a two dance, dance partners for the week and for the coming months and years, and it's been a lot of fun. So, and looking forward to a very productive year and very successful initiative.
Indeed.